Welcome everyone to PsychCentral.com's monthly webinar series. Today we have Donna C. Moss, who is with us to talk about why young adults struggle to break free in a great presentation that she's titled Failure to Launch Revisited. Remember, during the presentation, it's okay to type in all of your questions and I will moderate them at the end. Other than that, please enjoy, and there will be a recording of this available usually within 48 to 72 hours after that you can share with your coworkers. So that's enough from me. My name is Gabe Howard. I'm with PsychCentral.com, and we're going to hand it over to Donna. Donna, please introduce yourself and get started.
Okay, thank you so much, Gabe, for this opportunity. I put Donna C. Moss because if you Google Donna Moss, you'll get a character from The West Wing TV series, and I'm not that Donna Moss. So, and you get about 4 pages of that Donna Moss before you get me. So, she's a fictional character. I'm a real character. So I've been doing psychotherapy for over 25 years. I've also worked in addition to private practice, I've worked as the National Director of Patient Services for the Leukemia Society of America and helped to start support groups for cancer patients all over the country. I also worked for Disney and iVillage in their heyday and WeightWatchers.com in their online heyday as a health producer and editor and manager. So with that, I've been working a lot with young adults here in my office in Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. And if you want to see more of what I have to say, you can visit my website on not my website is www.donnacmoss.com, and also my blog, which you could find on Psych Central. It's called Sext, Text, and What's Next. So this idea of failure to launch came from working with a lot of young adult women, mostly. And I find that there are many, many reasons why they're living in their parents' basement. It's really not that they're lazy. So I wanted to reframe the issue as something that we can help them with as society and as therapists and as family. Okay? So the first thing I have is, oh, I can't read my own slide because of the little boxy thing, Gabe. Okay, well, let's see if I can make that go away.
Yeah, you're able to minimize the window? Even making your window smaller should help. The window with the slide.
Let me do that. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Back to slide 2. Okay, so I have that young adults see the world as black or white, which is common, as we all know from some of our CBT work, but I see this much, much more exaggerated in teens and young adults, as we know. So if you're 21 years old, you cannot know certain things about life, yet young adults think they must be perfect right out of the gate. Life is trial and error. You must be able to take a risk at failing in order to pick yourself up and know you will survive to try again. This resiliency sets you up for a lifetime of strength. If you do not allow yourself to make mistakes in your 20s, you will be frozen in time. So a lot of people I meet are young people that literally frozen onto the couch. And they think that if they're not perfect, that they might as well not try. And I don't know where they get this idea from, but certainly most of us adults aren't perfect at everything, so why should kids be perfect at everything? So perfectionism is definitely one of the biggest obstacles, and this is for smart kids and also not so smart kids. They just think they've got this idea like Eeyore, kind of like a very defeatist, cynical attitude, perhaps from the messages in our society that why bother, it's too hard to succeed at a very young age. And they're too rigid in their expectations. So making mistakes is part of growing up. Correcting mistakes and moving on is part of learning. If you knew everything, there would be no need for work. Few people are born with a complete capacity to know what they want and do it, like people who are born just knowing I'm going to be a doctor. Most people have to go on a windy path. So again, there's myths about the expectations for young adults that they should just know and follow their dreams. And they don't realize that it's okay to change their course if it's not working for them. The harder you work on yourself, the better off you'll be. All of these things are important for a young person's development, yet it is rarely discussed. They just leave college, and then they lose their entire friend group and all their support emotionally, and then it feels like they're jumping off a cliff. And this actually happened to me when I left college. I was living in my grandmother's apartment in Queens, and I had no friends for the first time in my life. And it was not a good way to start out your next phase of your life. So support is critical, and rigid thinking, if it becomes more relaxed, can allow you to make mistakes. I also find that young people who are coming in have no ability to really tolerate pain. So in other words, they don't appreciate that pain and suffering is part of life, as the Buddha told us. And that, you know, if you can embrace it and get through it with the help of a skilled professional or friends or family, then you'll become, again, more a richer, deeper young adult. So in your 30s and 40s, life gets harder. There could be losses, illness, separation, setbacks financially, emotionally. So in your 20s, you don't know yet. So the reality that life is hard is not yet real for you. You think it's supposed to be this way or that. I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a mommy. These ideas are fixed from childhood, but they may no longer serve you. So young adults, again, need to be reinforced that their childish ideas that life is just one way are no longer suitable as life gets messier and more complicated. In your 20s, fixed ideas no longer work because life is full of messes, bureaucracy, waiting, and near misses. It is in the trying that you learn you are stronger than you think. So I work with a lot of kids to just sit down and write that cover letter, write that resume. I'll do it with them, just so they're in motion, that they're doing something, and that they're making baby steps. If they're anxious, if they're scared, well, let's do it together. But if they conclude that no effort is required, or they're just going to worry and worry about it, then their world becomes very small. And this is also what I see a lot. And they complain of being bored, which boredom is really one of the worst things for a teen or a young adult that you can imagine, because that's what leads to more addiction, more reckless behaviors, and also not sleeping, which puts everything into a lens of real dark depression a lot of times. This book here, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, is great for young adults because it actually, the subtitle is Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and Embrace Who You Are. So that's the exploration that you absolutely have to do in order to move out of your parents' basement. When young adults come to therapy, they often state things in these very black and white terms. I'm supposed to be at this step in my career. I'm not on track with my peers. I can't do things that others seem to be doing. On social media, I am a have-not. I ruined my 20s. I am to blame for the ills of the world. I am too insecure to even go out. I've heard all those statements. And like one girl said, I'm 26, I have nothing, I'm never going to be anything. And I kind of laughed to myself because 26 is pretty young to give up. And you really don't have the option to just stay in your room all day. And what I find is that their avoidance just reinforces more avoidance and more avoidance until they're just stuck. And a lot of young girls, believe it or not, are so consumed with their appearance, even in this day and age, that they sometimes don't go out and try to make friends, which is very sad. And I try to remind them that nobody's scrutinizing every little part of their body because they're too busy worrying about themselves. And then, of course, on Facebook, it seems like everybody has the perfect life, and I hear that over and over. Well, everybody else has the perfect life. Well, I'm in my 50s, and I still see other people from my high school who seem like they have the perfect life. But if you dig a little deeper, you see that it's not always about money. In the last decade, the loan situation about college costs, even if you just take a certificate like massage or nursing or EMT or accounting, has ratcheted up to the sky. Paying back a monthly loan when you're 25 is hazardous to your health because it diminishes your ability to take risks. And this is a real problem. You see a lot of young people coming in now who just decided they can't afford to go to college, and that's that. And that's not a good way for our society to build a future, of course. In other countries like China, where I visited, they send all the smart kids who can pass the exams to college. So imagine what that's going to look like in 25 years. So why wouldn't you be stuck in your parents' basement when all that's left at the end of the month is debt? It's not that you're too lazy, it's that you don't have a dime. In my field of social work, the salaries are so low that most people can't even rent a private office after what they bring home. This is the rub of the bad economy. So even though the so-called recession is over, it still has a really lasting impact on young people. So instead of blaming our sons and daughters, let's help them with practical tasks. And these are things that I never learned to do as a young adult, and I think they're critical. Signing up on LinkedIn, spell checking a resume, getting a car inspected, dressing for an interview, loan backlash, loan consolidation, balancing a checkbook, changing a tire, writing a cover letter, or sending a thank you note. There are so many college graduates that I meet in my office who don't know how to write a letter. It is really shocking. So I'm not blaming them, but let's teach them. They're so afraid. They're afraid to go out. They're afraid of people. They're afraid of men, relationships. They're afraid of failure and success. And they're afraid of the world, which unfortunately is violent and chaotic. I had a girl who lived on her own when she was 16 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but was afraid to leave her house in the Bronx just because it was unfamiliar. Fear of leaving your parents, fear of abandonment, fear of living alone. Once you live in fear and anxiety and depression, substances creep into daily life from sheer boredom. It is not unusual to find a 20-something who is not only afraid, but also addicted. And then we have phones, weed, alcohol, cigarettes, vape, pills, internet, gaming, gambling, and more. And then if you look at the parents, they're also struggling. there's no support. If your parents don't have the money to send you anywhere where you can develop skills and self-confidence like camp, sports clubs, hobby classes, arts and music lessons, then you're already behind some of your peers. And I ask kids and young adults every single day, can you get a hobby? Do you have any interest? Do you have anything you like to do other than sit in your room on your phone? And more, I find that people just don't have the creativity or the resources or the wherewithal to just get out and try something new. And it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be Irish step dancing, it could be stargazing, it could be knitting, but something where you get up and you get out and you go into the world. And then soon you decide that you don't care about competing with your friends who do go out. So you sit around on your phone day after day until sitting around becomes a way of life. And this is no joke. They just, it seems like an activity. And the next thing you know, the whole day or the whole night, which is worse, goes by and they don't sleep. And then on top of all of that, there's also developmental trauma, abuse, bullying. A lot of our research shows that kids who have been sexually or physically or emotionally abused or bullied growing up lack the neuropsychological strength to develop free of PTSD. So that for each year that the abuse took place, they have thereby lost a year of normal development. This is so critical. I'll say it again. For each year that the abuse took place, they have lost a year of normal development. So say you're getting abused by your uncle from age 13 to 16. Instead of learning how to make and manage friends, which is the task of teenagers, you're too triggered to leave the house. Now you're 25 and you wonder why you can't make friends. This is tragic and not your fault. And there's a great book about this called Stolen Tomorrows. And if anyone knows a child or a young adult or teenager who's suffered from any kind of abuse, this book is wonderful. It tells the therapist to slow down the therapy, which is really critical to taking it very slowly so that the young adult can first heal before they move forward. This is just a slide that shows some of the devastation in our society, besides violence, which we unfortunately hear about every day. 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. Self-report studies show that 20% of adult females and 5 to 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault. During a 1-year period in the U.S., 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. And over the course of their lifetimes, 28% of U.S. youth aged 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. According to a National Institute of Justice report, 3 out of 4 adolescents who have been sexually assaulted were victimized by someone they knew well. So a lot of our time in therapy has to connect them to healing of trauma before they can set goals for their future. And there he is, my dog Milo, looking back, showing that parents can be overwhelmed and impaired themselves. If you grew up with a disabled or unemployed or alcoholic or divorced parent, a parent working double shifts, you missed out on vital help you might need to succeed. It's hard to catch up in your 20s. Sometimes it takes a whole decade to make up for these missing milestones. And a lot of what I do with these young kids is really try to light a fire underneath them so that they don't wake up when they're 30 or 40 and say, oh, shit, I forgot to live my life. I forgot to start my life. And whatever can motivate them, we try. Social anxiety. Instead of running out to get married like some did in previous generations, you avoid social situations, and avoidance reinforces avoidance. It's easy. and then you wake up and say, whoa, I forgot to grow up. You have to push past your comfort zone and get off the phone, even though it may hurt. And this one I just love. Anxiety girl, able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. And this is true for many of us, but especially girls. And there's so many reasons for that, but hopefully it will change if we can get a female president one day. This slide says, one reason I live with my parents is to beat Thanksgiving traffic. So stop checking your phone. Stop checking to see where your friends are. There's even an app called Find My Friends on the iPhone. Why should you stop? Because feeling excluded reinforces your negativity bias that you are somehow unworthy or missing out. Fear of missing out, they call it. People do get left out for many reasons, and children learn this around 7th grade. However, by checking, you only magnify what you already know. You cannot be all things to all people. Let it go and find something more productive to do, like going to the gym. This slide shows that the amount of young adult children living at home in California, for example, has risen over the last, from 2000 to 2010, from 23% to 30.7%. So the trend is going up, up, up. So it says, get a life. Don't post Snapchat stories that you don't want public. Once you put it out there that you were with Tommy X, you can't take it back from his ex-girlfriend. And you know this. In some circles, this can cause World War III in your friend group. Knock it off. I've had 2 teenagers in my practice land up in the hospital because their nudes were shared around the school. It's certainly obvious to most kids that it's not a good idea. But you can't be reminded enough. You don't know where it's going to go. Don't scroll Facebook every day. For me, it was seeing vacations while I was spending the days in a hospital with my husband over the break. Remember, not everyone leads the life of leisure. Facebook is fundamentally skewed to happy people, so go away. And many adults also need to be told, just go off the phone so you can focus on yourself, on your breathing, on regulating your mood, your sleep, your diet, your friendships, instead of just wasting away on the phone. And I myself am guilty of the phone addiction. Holding a little computer in your hand is pretty damn compelling, but not if it makes you feel like crap every day. This picture says, this is our hard liquor gift basket for people whose kids move back home this year. So, yeah, parents are frustrated, and I get that, but what are they doing to support their kids? I say Instagram should be for art, not seeing who likes your every post. Who has time for that? If you're like the teens I see who literally count the likes of ex-boyfriends, you are more insecure than you thought you were. Stop wasting your time talking to stupid boys and get a life that makes you more interesting so you can meet a real person that treats you like more than its way. By the way, boys are 2 years developmentally behind girls until the age of 25. So a lot of girls come in at age 20 to 25 with completely broken hearts and heartache. And they need help and support being guided to get through that critical phase of a broken heart. And once they know they can survive that, they can survive a lot of things. And parents need to be aware that broken heart is a normal developmental phase of a 20-something. This is just resources, and we can make this available later. Health organizations, Go Ask Alice has been around for years for sexual and emotional health. teens' health websites, teenhealth.org, and I saw something recently called, and this is great to know about, crisistextline.org. Crisistextline.org is a wonderful new website that allows teens and young adults to reach out by text and get answered by text. And their premise was, if this is how they communicate, then this is how we'll communicate with them. And so the old adage, go where the patient is, from social work school, is perfect for that, because they're on text, you meet them on text. And they're open 24/7, and they say that the biggest predictor of suicide is not the words death or depression, it's the sad face emoji. That is the biggest predictor on their website. So watch those emojis and take good care of yourself. Oh, there's also apps that you can put on your phone to feel better in the moment, for mindfulness, for mood, for CBT and DBT, which we can learn about later. And all those practices, CBT, DBT, family therapy, all have to be integrated to help young adults have a base of support from which they can launch. So it's our fault. We need to give them more, because if there's nothing to launch from, then how can they launch? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions lined up, so I will grab the first one. If there's any more questions, please go ahead and type them in now, and she'll stick around until she answers them all. So that was a great job. Thank you so much. Are you ready for the first question?
Yes.
All right. How would you help someone who has a chronic lack of motivation due to depression and does not have any dream or passion to follow?
Well, that's the $25,000 question, and it's a tricky question for therapists, because you can't do the work for them, right? Like, for many years, I would spend week after week with kids saying, are you interested in this? What about this? Why don't we try this? Why don't we look up this? Why don't you just try it? And I'm doing all the work, and I wonder why I'm so exhausted, and that's because I'm doing the work and that they should be doing. So they have to take a leap of faith and to take baby steps to try one new thing. You know, write it down and say, I'm going to try this. And then report back on how was it, even if it sucked. Just report back without any judgment. This is what takes the pressure off. This is what I tell them. Try something without judgment. So even if you fail at it, it doesn't matter. Just tell me how it was. What was it like? What was it like being scared? And then we have grist for the mill, so to speak.
Thank you so much. Now, okay, let me make sure that I'm understanding the question correctly. The question is you said that you talk to a lot of young adults that are in therapy. So that means the young adult recognizes that something isn't going the way that they want it to, and they're seeking out therapy for support. How can a parent or adult in a young adult's life encourage somebody to seek this help? Some folks that live in their basement live in their parents' basement don't realize anything is wrong. So how can you help them get into therapy or get moving along the path?
Right, that's a great question, because obviously I'm talking about a group who at least has enough motivation to recognize that they need therapy. But a lot of them come because of a crisis. And that's not the way it should be. Our society should be structured around more of a prevention approach to identify depression in school or through screenings or through doctors, but there's still so much stigma around it, and I frankly don't understand that. I still say 2017, and help is available. So for a parent to approach a kid or a kid to approach a parent and say, I need some help, what do you think about therapy? Obviously, we are all trained to believe that that's something that should be available to everybody, but in reality, there's still obstacles. I mean, one of the things with my practice is I still take insurance, even though none of my colleagues do. Why do I choose to make less money? Is because I want it to be available to people who really need it.
Wonderful, thank you. As you were answering it, several questions popped up that said, what kind of crisis? So what would you say a typical crisis is that leads a young adult in your direction?
I see about 3 themes on that. One is bombing out of some kind of academic thing. Like I had a girl the other day that had a panic attack during a medical school exam, and her world kind of came crashing down around her. Kids who have addictions, of course, that's common. It's in the suburbs, drinking and other more dangerous substances. Then there's terrible family conflict that brings people into therapy. There's of course inherited mental illness, which can manifest in your 20s, which is more complicated and usually requires medical intervention. And then there's breakups and kids who are just anxious to go to work, but don't feel that like they have the confidence, so they blew up some kind of interview. They sabotage themselves because of lack of self-esteem. And then that's when they realize, oh my God, maybe I need maybe I need to look at myself and why I'm reacting in these very fearful ways.
Wonderful, very good. Now this is the last question that we have at the moment, so if anybody has any additional questions, please go ahead and type them in right now. But the question is, what's the success rate? How do young adults that see you and start working towards the future, how many of them 10 years out end up all right?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one to measure in therapy. We need to do a much better job in my profession. In social work, we don't measure it that well. We don't track it. We don't have good research to say. I don't have good research to say exactly what happens, but most people do tend to stay about 6 months or a year, and then they go out in the world and they start to at least get some modest success, and then they're on their way. And then some of them circle back in another decade when new life challenges come. But I've had a lot of success with these young girls. I also do a group for young adult women once a month, and they help each other a lot. And they've all gotten through a lot of hurdles, and they keep in touch. So they seem to be doing pretty well.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Well, do you have any parting words?
Yeah, I think that young adults and all of us need to understand that life is just full of bumps and ups and downs, and to just go forth with even if you don't feel ready, even if you're scared, just say, so what? So I'm a little scared, I'm a little anxious, anxiety's not going to kill me, and do it anyway.
Oh, wonderful. And a couple of questions just popped in, so let's go ahead and grab those. Are there any self-help techniques that you utilized often when working with patients dealing with crises?
Well, of course, like I said before this, I use a lot of CBT, DBT, and family therapy, and I find that family therapy is such a critical piece because people can talk in your office for a year about their mother, and then they go back and the same thing happens over and over. So of course we learn in family therapy, bring them on in. And I often say, listen, you're in the driver's seat, this is your therapy, but if you're complaining about your mother, let's talk to your mother. And I have no qualms about doing that. CBT, of course, is when you can learn to diffuse your negative self-talk and say to yourself, like, I'm not perfect, but I'm not a mess either. I'm not a total mess. So talk yourself down from those absolutes. And then DBT is the best thing that's happened to therapy in years, which is learning basic meditation and relaxation, which, you know, you can't go wrong with because it's free and makes the world a more peaceful place.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then as a parent of some boomerangs, I have to say your presentation is really insightful and real. What kinds of resources are available for parents to adjust their expectations and parenting communication approaches?
Well, that's a great question. It sounds like there's a book in there. I think a frank discussion about finances, which I never got as a 20-something. I think spending time with your kids on more practical things, which we're so consumed with this college race to nowhere type of thing. We forget that kids just need to learn how to go to the bank. And I mean, my daughter is at a fantastic school, and she's doing really, really well, but she doesn't know how to go to the post office. And that's true. And she's traveled all over the world. So I guess being a little more concrete with them, that's what I would say on practical life matters. Learning how to cook. I never learned how to cook either.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. So it looks like we are out of questions. So I appreciate you so much for being here. Again, I know that I already asked if you had any parting words, but we'll go ahead and ask it more officially this time. The last words are yours. Please go ahead and give us all the places that we can contact you as well, your blog links, etc., and take us home.
Oh, thank you. Well, as I said, my practice is here in New York. You can find me on www.donnacmoss.com and also on Psych Central's blog called Sex, Text, and What's Next. And what else? You know, keep in touch, moss.donna@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, and we are out. Oh, we're out as soon as I hit the button.